The harsh spring sun beat down on Lily Thompson's tear-streaked face as she stood frozen at the altar of Pendleton's only church, her trembling hands clutching her small bouquet of wildflowers so tightly the stems began to snap. The year was 1878, and what should have been the happiest day of her 20-year-old life had just shattered into 1,000 pieces. "I won't marry a woman who's carrying another man's child," Edward Franklin announced to the packed congregation, his voice dripping with disgust as he stepped away from her. "You've made a fool of me, Lily." The gasps that rippled through the church felt like physical blows. Lily's white knuckles pressed against the slight swell of her abdomen, hidden beneath the modest wedding dress her mother had spent weeks sewing. 4 months pregnant and now abandoned at the altar, her carefully constructed future crumbling before her eyes. "Edward, please," she whispered, reaching for his arm, but he jerked away as if her touch might contaminate him. "Don't," he hissed. "You told me the child was mine, that we'd been careless that night after the harvest dance. You're nothing but a liar." Lily's chest constricted. "The baby is yours. I've never been with anyone else." Edward's father stood up from the front pew, his face purple with rage. "My son will not saddle himself with your bastard. The timing doesn't add up, girl. Everyone knows you've been spending time with that drifter who passed through last fall." The whispers grew louder. Lily looked desperately toward her own parents, hoping for support, but her father stared at the floor while her mother sobbed quietly into a handkerchief. Reverend Phillips cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. There's nothing to discuss," Edward said flatly. "The wedding is off." As Edward stormed down the aisle, followed by his family and friends, Lily felt her knees weaken. This couldn't be happening. Edward had promised to stand by her when she'd tearfully confessed her pregnancy 2 months ago. He'd insisted they marry quickly to save her reputation, he'd said. Now she understood his haste had been to establish the child as his own before anyone could question the timing. But something had changed his mind. Lily sank to her knees on the altar steps, her wedding dress pooling around her. The remaining guests began filing out, avoiding her eyes, eager to escape the uncomfortable scene. She'd become a spectacle, the fallen woman of Pendleton, Oregon, Miss Thompson. The deep voice startled her. Lily looked up through tear-blurred vision to see a tall figure standing before her. She recognized him vaguely, Jake Dawson, one of the cowboys from the Rocking H Ranch outside town. His hat was in his hands, dark brown hair falling across his forehead, blue eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I reckon you've been dealt a poor hand today," he said quietly, his voice carrying only to her ears. "But I've got a proposition if you're willing to hear it." Lily stared up at him, too numb with shock to speak. Jake Dawson knelt down beside her, bringing himself to her level. "I'll be your husband, madam, if you'll have me." The few remaining people in the church gasped. Lily's mother stopped crying abruptly. "You don't even know me," Lily whispered. "I know enough," Jake replied. "I know you don't deserve what just happened. I know that child deserves a name, and I know I've got a small homestead that needs a woman's touch." He paused. "It ain't a romantic proposal, I admit, but it's an honest one." Lily searched his face, looking for signs of mockery or ulterior motives. She found none, only steady determination in his weathered features. Jake Dawson was known around Pendleton as a hard worker, quiet but fair. He'd come to the territory 5 years ago and had slowly established himself as reliable, if somewhat solitary. "Why would you do this?" she asked. Jake's eyes flickered briefly to her stomach before meeting her gaze again. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Thompson. Including that little one you're carrying." Before Lily could respond, her father finally found his voice, approaching from where he'd been standing frozen in shock. "Now see here, Dawson," he began, but Jake stood and faced him directly. "Mr. Thompson," Jake said firmly, "your daughter needs a husband and that baby needs a father. I'm offering both right here and now." "You can't just actually," Reverend Phillips interrupted, adjusting his spectacles nervously, "as we are gathered in the house of the Lord with witnesses present. If both parties consent, I could perform the ceremony today." The Reverend's wife approached, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Dear, you don't have to decide this minute. This is all very sudden." But as Lily looked around at the pitying glances and whispers behind hands, she realized what her future in Pendleton would be without a husband. Unwed mothers became social outcasts. She would bring shame to her family, and her child would bear the stigma of illegitimacy forever. She rose unsteadily to her feet, smoothing the fabric of the wedding dress she'd been so proud of just an hour ago. "Mr. Dawson," she said, finding strength she didn't know she possessed, "I accept your proposal." Reverend Phillips looked between them uncertainly. "Are you sure about this, Miss Thompson? Marriage is not something to enter into lightly." "I'm sure," Lily said, more firmly than she felt. What choice did she have? This stranger was offering her respectability, a name for her child. It was more than Edward had ultimately been willing to give. Jake nodded once, replacing his hat atop his head before removing it again in deference to being in church. "Then I reckon we should get on with it. I've got cattle to tend to before sundown." And so, with her parents as stunned witnesses, Lily Thompson became Lily Dawson in a ceremony that lasted less than 10 minutes. She spoke her vows mechanically, still in shock, barely registering the brief touch of Jake's calloused hand against hers as they exchanged the simple gold band that had been meant for Edward's finger. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Jake didn't kiss her. He simply offered his arm, which she took automatically, and led her down the aisle and out into the bright afternoon sun of Pendleton. Lily's mother hurried after them. "Lily, what have you done? You don't know this man." "She's made her choice, Mrs. Thompson," Jake said calmly. "And I aim to be a good husband to her. But her things, her clothes, you can send them to my homestead when you're ready," Jake replied, 3 miles north of town, just past Willow Creek. Lily's father caught up, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "Dawson, I expect you to treat my daughter well. This whole situation is irregular." "Yes, sir," Jake agreed, "but I give you my word your daughter and her child will be cared for." He turned to Lily then, his expression softening slightly. "My wagon's over yonder." "Unless you'd rather spend the night here in town with your folks," Lily shook her head. The thought of facing anyone in Pendleton right now was unbearable. "No, let's go home." The word felt strange on her tongue. As Jake helped her into the wagon, her mother pressed a hastily gathered bundle into her arms, a nightgown, a hairbrush, a few personal items. "I'll bring the rest tomorrow," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Lily nodded mutely, unable to process the way her life had just completely transformed. This morning she'd been Edward Franklin's bride-to-be, with dreams of running the mercantile alongside him. Now she was the wife of a cowboy she barely knew, headed for a homestead she'd never seen. The wagon lurched forward, leaving the church and the whispers behind. Lily sat rigid beside her new husband, clutching her small bundle of belongings, wondering what kind of life awaited her. "It ain't much," Jake said after they'd been traveling in silence for several minutes. "The homestead, I mean, got a small house, a barn, some good grazing land. Been working on it for 3 years now." Lily nodded, not trusting her voice. "Got about 40 head of cattle, 6 horses, planning to expand come fall if the summer grass is good." She realized he was trying in his way to prepare her for what was to come. To give her some sense of what her new life would entail. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible over the creak of wagon wheels. Truly, Jake kept his eyes on the trail ahead, his hands steady on the reins. "Seemed like the right thing to do. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he repeated his words from the church. "Seen you around town, at the general store, the socials. You've always been kind to folks, even old Mrs. Wilson, who tests everyone's patience." Lily couldn't help the small smile that briefly touched her lips. Mrs. Wilson was indeed a trial, with her constant complaints and criticism. "That doesn't mean you had to marry me." Jake was quiet for so long Lily thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Everyone deserves someone who'll stand by them when times get hard. Today, you needed someone to stand by you." There was something in his voice, some old pain that made Lily look at him more closely, but his expression revealed nothing as he guided the horses around a bend in the road. As the trail crested a small rise, Jake slowed the wagon. "There it is, home." Lily looked ahead to see a modest homestead nestled against the backdrop of rolling hills. A small cabin with a front porch sat at the center, smoke curling from its chimney. A weathered barn stood nearby, and beyond that, a corral where several horses grazed. It wasn't grand by any means, but something about the neat fence lines and the carefully tended garden patch suggested care and attention. "It's nice," she said, meaning it despite her uncertainty about everything else. "Been working on adding a second room," Jake said, urging the horses forward again. "Figured someday I might, well, need more space than just the one room." The implication hung in the air between them. He'd been building with the hope of someday having a family. Now he had an instant one, a wife, and soon a child. As they drew closer, the front door of the cabin opened, and an older woman stepped out, shielding her eyes against the sun. "That's Mrs. Gunderson," Jake explained. "Comes by 3 times a week to help with cooking and such. Her husband died in the war, and she takes in laundry and helps neighbors to make ends meet." Mrs. Gunderson's eyes widened as she took in Lily in her wedding dress, seated beside Jake in the wagon. "Mr. Dawson," she called as they pulled up to the hitching post. "I wasn't expecting you back so early," and with company, Jake hopped down from the wagon and came around to help Lily descend. "Mrs. Gunderson, this is Lily, my wife." The older woman's mouth fell open. "Your wife, but you weren't courting anyone. When did this happen?" "Today," Jake said simply. "It's been a long afternoon for Mrs. Dawson. Would you mind getting some tea ready while I see to the horses?" Mrs. Gunderson recovered quickly, her initial shock giving way to practical efficiency. Of course, come in, dear. You look like you could use a sit down." Lily allowed herself to be led into the cabin, acutely aware of how out of place she must look in her wedding finery. The interior was simple but surprisingly comfortable. A large fireplace dominated one wall, with a sturdy table and chairs nearby. A curtained alcove presumably hid the bed, and shelves lined with books suggested Jake was more educated than the average cowhand. "So," Mrs. Gunderson said as she put a kettle on to boil, "a sudden wedding, is it? And if you don't mind my saying so, you look like you were meant to be marrying someone else today." Lily sank into a chair, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. "I was," she admitted, "but he changed his mind when he found out about the baby." Understanding dawned on Mrs. Gunderson's face. "Ah." "And Jake stepped in." Lily nodded, tears threatening again. The older woman patted her hand. "Well, you could do far worse, dear. Jake Dawson is a good man, keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair and hardworking. Never heard him speak an unkind word about anyone." "But I barely know him," Lily whispered. "Sometimes that's not such a bad thing," Mrs. Gunderson replied sagely. "No disappointments yet. You get to learn each other fresh." She poured the tea and placed a steaming cup before Lily. "Drink this, it'll steady you." As Lily sipped the hot tea, she heard Jake entering the barn, speaking softly to the horses. Through the window, she could see him efficiently unhitching the team, his movements sure and practiced. "He'll be a good father," Mrs. Gunderson said, following Lily's gaze. "Always gentle with the young animals, patient." Lily's hand went unconsciously to her stomach. The reality of her situation was slowly sinking in. She was married to a stranger, expecting a child, living on a remote homestead miles from town. Yet somehow, watching Jake tend to his animals with quiet competence, she felt the first faint glimmer of hope that perhaps things might turn out all right after all. Mrs. Gunderson busied herself preparing a simple supper, chatting about practical matters where things were kept in the kitchen, which day was best for laundry, how the vegetable garden was coming along. The normalcy of it helped calm Lily's frayed nerves. By the time Jake came in, washing up at the basin by the door, Lily had changed out of her wedding dress into the plain nightgown her mother had packed, covered with a shawl for modesty. "Mrs. Gunderson," Jake said, "would you mind staying the night? You could take the bed and I'll make up pallets out here for Mrs. Dawson and myself." The arrangement made Lily realize he was trying to give her time to adjust, to not pressure her with the expectations of a normal wedding night. Relief flooded through her. "Of course, Mrs. Gunderson agreed readily. "Happy to help you both get settled." They ate a simple meal of stew and bread, the conversation stilted and careful. Afterward, Jake excused himself to check on a newborn calf while Mrs. Gunderson helped Lily make up a sleeping pallet near the fireplace. "He's trying to make this easier for you," the older woman said quietly as they spread blankets on the floor. "Not many men would be so considerate." Lily nodded, guilt mingling with her gratitude. This man had tied himself to her for life, taking on the responsibility of another man's child, asking nothing in return. The magnitude of his sacrifice was only beginning to dawn on her when Jake returned. Mrs. Gunderson had retired behind the curtained alcove, and Lily sat by the fire, brushing out her long brown hair. He paused in the doorway as if uncertain whether he was intruding. "You can come in," Lily said softly. "It's your home." "Our home now," he corrected, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. He remained standing awkwardly, clearly unsure of his place in this new arrangement. Lily set down her brush. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did today." Jake shook his head. "No need for thanks." "There is," she insisted. "You've changed your entire life for a woman you don't know, for a child that isn't yours." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know what it's like to be judged for things beyond your control." His eyes met hers briefly before looking away. No child should start life carrying that burden. There was a story there, Lily sensed, but she didn't press. Instead, she said, "I want you to know that Edward lied. The baby is his. I've never been with anyone else." Jake's expression softened. "You don't owe me explanations, Lily." The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Nevertheless, I want you to know the truth. After the harvest dance last fall, it only happened once. When I told him about the baby, he insisted we marry quickly. I thought it was because he loved me and wanted to do right by us." Her voice caught. "But today, his father convinced him the timing wasn't right, that the baby couldn't be his. Edward chose to believe that lie rather than stand by me. Then he's a fool," Jake said simply. Lily looked up, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "A man who'd abandon his own child doesn't deserve to call himself a man," Jake continued. "As for you," his eyes held her steadily, "you've shown more courage today than most folks show in a lifetime." Tears welled in Lily's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "I don't feel very courageous." "Courage isn't about not being afraid," Jake said. "It's about doing what needs doing despite the fear." A comfortable silence fell between them. For the first time since the disastrous scene at the church, Lily felt something inside her uncoil slightly. "We should get some sleep," Jake finally said. "Morning comes early on a ranch." He made up his own pallet, a respectful distance from hers, close enough to the fire to share its warmth but far enough to give her space. As he settled down, Lily found herself studying the man who was now her husband, the strong profile illuminated by firelight, the careful way he moved, the quiet dignity he carried. "Good night, Mr. Dawson," she said softly. He turned his head toward her, a small smile touching his lips. "Jake," he corrected gently. "Reckon you should call me Jake." "Good night, Jake." "Good night, Lily." As she drifted toward sleep, Lily realized that for the first time all day she felt safe. The weeks that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, Jake rose before dawn to tend to the animals, returning to find Lily already at work in the kitchen. After the first week, Mrs. Gunderson reduced her visits to twice weekly, giving the newlyweds space to find their own way together. Lily threw herself into creating a home, grateful for the distraction from her tumultuous emotions. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, when to expect Jake for meals, how to manage the small flock of chickens, what vegetables thrived in the garden soil. She discovered that Jake was a man of routine, steady and reliable, but also considerate in ways she hadn't expected. He finished the second room within 2 weeks, working every evening after his ranch chores were complete. "For the baby," he explained simply, but Lily knew it was also to give her privacy. Though legally husband and wife, they continued to sleep separately, Jake on a pallet by the fire, Lily in the bed behind the curtained alcove. One evening in late April, as Lily was preparing supper, Jake came in from mending fences, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. Got something for you, he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. Ordered it from the mercantile in town. Curious, Lily wiped her hands on her apron and accepted the package. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a fine pen. Mrs. Gunderson mentioned you used to keep a diary, Jake explained. Thought you might want to start again. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Lily deeply. She'd indeed kept a journal for years, but had left it behind at her parents' house in her hasty departure. Thank you, she said, running her fingers over the smooth leather cover. This is very kind. Jake shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her gratitude. Just want you to have things that make you happy. It was the first personal gift he'd given her, a sign that he was seeing her as more than just a responsibility. That night, Lily began writing again, pouring out her confused feelings onto the blank pages, her gratitude toward Jake, her anger at Edward, her fear about the future, and her growing attachment to the quiet cowboy who had become her husband. As April turned to May, Lily's pregnancy became more pronounced, her belly swelling visibly beneath her dresses. Jake never mentioned it directly, but she noticed he began taking on more of the heavier chores without being asked, and always made sure she had time to rest in the afternoons. Lily's parents visited once, bringing the remainder of her belongings and awkwardly attempting to make conversation with their new son-in-law. Jake was polite but reserved, answering their questions about his ranch and his plans, but volunteering little personal information. After they left, Lily found Jake on the porch staring out at the setting sun. They mean well, she said, settling into the chair beside him. They're worried, Jake replied. Natural enough. They like you, Lily assured him. They're just adjusting, as we all are. Jake nodded, his eyes still on the horizon. Your father asked if I needed help with the next cattle drive, offered to come along. That's his way of trying to know you better. I told him I'd welcome the help. Lily smiled, touched by his willingness to build bridges with her family. Thank you for that. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that had become increasingly common as they grew accustomed to each other's presence. When I was 16, Jake said suddenly, my mother died of fever. My father started drinking after that, gambling. Lost our farm in Missouri. Lily turned to look at him, surprised by the unprompted revelation. In the weeks they'd lived together, Jake had shared little about his past. I'm sorry, she said softly. He'd get mean when he drank, Jake continued, his voice flat. Take it out on me mostly. One night when I was 17, he lost big at cards, came home raging. I stood up to him for the first time. He paused. He pulled a knife. I defended myself. He fell on his own blade. Lily's hand went to her mouth. He lived, but word got around that I'd tried to kill my own father. Nobody wanted to hear my side of it, so I left, worked my way west, ranch to ranch. Nobody knew me here, so I could start fresh. Now Lily understood his earlier words about knowing what it was like to be judged. Is that why you helped me? Because you know what it's like to be shunned? Jake turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. Partly, but also because I saw something in you worth standing up for. The sincerity in his voice made Lily's heart flutter unexpectedly. She'd grown to respect Jake over the past weeks, to appreciate his quiet strength and unfailing kindness. But this was the first time she'd felt something that might, with time, grow into more. Thank you for telling me, she said. He nodded once, then rose. Getting dark. Should check on that new calf before turning in. As he walked toward the barn, Lily remained on the porch, her hand resting on her growing belly, thinking about fresh starts and second chances. The following week brought unexpected visitors. Lily was hanging laundry when she heard approaching horses. Looking up, she saw Edward Franklin and his father riding toward the homestead. Her heart lurched painfully. Jake emerged from the barn, immediately sensing her distress. He crossed to stand beside her, a silent show of support as the two men dismounted. Lily, Edward said, removing his hat, you're looking well. She felt anything but well at that moment, her stomach churning with anger and residual hurt. What do you want, Edward? Mr. Franklin stepped forward. We've come to make things right, he said, his tone businesslike. There's been a misunderstanding. Jake's stance shifted slightly, placing himself more fully between Lily and the visitors. Mrs. Dawson and I are rather busy today, gentlemen. State your business plainly. Edward flushed at the pointed emphasis on Lily's new name. I've reconsidered my position, he said stiffly. I believe I acted hastily at the church. I've come to offer Lily Mrs. Dawson financial support for the child. Lily stared at him in disbelief. Financial support? Yes, Mr. Franklin interjected. We're prepared to provide a monthly stipend for the child's upbringing. It's the proper thing to do, assuming the child is indeed my son's. Jake's voice was dangerously quiet. You ride onto my land to insult my wife and question the paternity of our child, your child, Edward scoffed. We all know the truth, Dawson. The truth, Jake said evenly, is that this is my wife and my child in the eyes of God and the law. We don't need or want your money. Mr. Franklin's expression hardened. Now see here, Dawson, we're trying to do the honorable thing. The child has a right to Franklin's support. The child has a name, Jake countered, Dawson, and everything that comes with it, including a father who chose to be one. Lily found her voice at last. You had your chance, Edward. You stood in front of the entire town and rejected us. Her hand moved protectively over her belly. You don't get to ease your conscience now with money. Edward's face reddened. You can't possibly prefer life on this dusty ranch with him to what I could provide. The contempt in his voice sparked something fierce in Lily. I prefer a husband who stands by me to one who abandoned me at the first test of his character. Mr. Franklin stepped toward her, his finger raised. Now you listen here, young lady. Jake moved so quickly Lily barely saw it. Suddenly he was toe-to-toe with the older man, his voice low but carrying clearly in the yard. You take one more step toward my wife and you'll regret it. Now, both of you get back on your horses and ride out. This conversation is finished. Something in Jake's eyes must have convinced them of his seriousness. Mr. Franklin stepped back, his mouth a thin line of displeasure. This isn't over, Dawson, he said. That child has Franklin blood, but a Dawson heart, Jake replied steadily. And that's what matters. After they'd ridden away, Lily found herself trembling, a delayed reaction to the confrontation. Jake noticed immediately, guiding her to sit on the porch steps. You all right? He asked, concern evident in his voice. She nodded, though tears threatened. I never thought I'd have to see him again. Jake sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. He had no right to come here, he said, to upset you this way. Did you mean what you said? Lily asked suddenly, about the baby being yours. Jake's eyes met hers, unwavering. From the moment I said I do, that child became mine in every way that matters. Blood doesn't make a father, love and choice do. Love, Lily echoed softly. A flush crept up Jake's neck, but he didn't look away. I may not have known you long, Lily Dawson, but I know enough to care what happens to you and that baby. And where I come from, that's the beginning of love. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily since that fateful day at the church. Lily reached out hesitantly and placed her hand over Jake's. Thank you for defending us, she said. His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Always will, he promised. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Jake didn't sleep on a pallet by the fire. Instead, with shy consent from both sides, they shared the bed behind the curtain, Jake careful to maintain a respectful distance, but close enough that Lily could feel his warmth beside her. She fell asleep to the sound of his steady breathing, feeling safer than she had in months. As June arrived, bringing summer heat to the Oregon countryside, Lily felt increasingly unwieldy as her pregnancy advanced. Jake hired a local boy, Tommy Wilson, to help with the ranch work, allowing him more time to assist Lily with household tasks. You don't have to hover so, she told him one afternoon as he insisted on carrying a basket of vegetables she'd harvested from the garden. I'm not hovering, Jake protested, just being useful. You're watching me like I might break, Lily said, but her smile took any sting from the words. Jake set down the basket on the kitchen table. Never been around an expecting woman before, he admitted. Don't rightly know what's normal and what isn't. His concern was touching. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened steadily. They talked more easily now, shared small touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing the bread at supper. At night, the space between them in bed had gradually diminished until Lily often woke to find herself nestled against Jake's solid warmth. They hadn't discussed these developments explicitly, both seemingly content to let their relationship evolve naturally. But Lily found herself thinking more often of what it might be like to be a true wife to Jake in every sense. The thought no longer frightened her as it once had. One evening in mid-June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily felt the baby move stronger than ever before. Without thinking, she reached for Jake's hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" she asked. Jake's eyes widened as the baby kicked against his palm. That's something," he said, voice filled with wonder. "He's been active today," Lily said, smiling at his reaction. Jake questioned. "You think it's a boy?" Lily shrugged. "Just a feeling. Would you mind if it's a boy?" Jake's hand remained on her belly, his expression thoughtful. "I'd be proud of a son," he said. "Or a daughter. Either way." The baby kicked again, and Jake laughed a full, joyful sound Lily realized she'd rarely heard from him. "Strong little thing," he said appreciatively. "Like his father," Lily replied without thinking. Their eyes met, the implications of her words hanging in the air between them. Slowly, Jake leaned forward, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he pressed his lips gently to hers in their first real kiss. It was tentative at first, a question more than a demand. But when Lily's hand came up to rest against his cheek, the kiss deepened, becoming something more a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "Been wanting to do that for a while now," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" "Wasn't sure you were ready." "Didn't want to presume," Lily smiled, touched by his consideration. "I think I've been ready for some time now." That night, their shared bed became truly shared as Jake held her close, his hand protectively spanning her rounded belly. They didn't make love, Jake still mindful of her condition and her comfort, but the emotional intimacy was just as powerful. For the first time, Lily felt not just safe with Jake, but cherished. As July's heat settled over the land, Lily's time grew near. Mrs. Gunderson began staying at the homestead more frequently, teaching Lily what to expect and helping prepare for the baby's arrival. Jake finished a small cradle, crafted from pine wood and polished until it gleamed. "It's beautiful," Lily said, running her fingers over the smooth edges. "My grandfather made one like it for my father," Jake explained. "And my father made one for me, though I never got to use it. Seemed right to continue the tradition." The mention of traditions made Lily thoughtful. "We should discuss names," she said, "for the baby." Jake looked up from where he was placing a small mattress in the cradle. "Have you had thoughts about it?" Lily nodded. "If it's a girl, I'd like to name her after my grandmother, Margaret Dawson." Jake tested the name. "It's a good, strong name." "And if it's a boy?" Lily hesitated. "I was thinking perhaps Jacob, after his father." Jake stilled, clearly moved by the suggestion. "You'd want that?" "I would," Lily confirmed. "This child will be a Dawson through and through. He should carry your name." Jake crossed to her then, pulling her gently into his arms. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Lily nestled against him, marveling at how natural it felt now to be in his embrace. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had transformed into something real and precious. She hadn't expected to find love again so soon after Edward's betrayal, but love had found her nonetheless. "I never thought I'd be happy again," she confessed against Jake's chest. "That day at the church, when Edward left me standing there, I thought my life was over." Jake's arms tightened around her. "And now," Lily looked up at him, seeing in his eyes the same deep affection she felt in her heart. "Now I think it was just beginning." The baby came in the early morning hours of July 15, 1878, after a long night of labor. Mrs. Gunderson attended Lily, while Jake paced anxiously outside the bedroom door, coming in only when Lily called for him during the worst contractions. As dawn broke over the eastern hills, Lily's exhausted cry of effort was followed by the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. Jake, who had finally been allowed to hold Lily's hand through the final stages, stared in awe as Mrs. Gunderson placed a tiny, red-faced infant on Lily's chest. "You have a son, Mr. Dawson," the older woman announced, smiling broadly. Jacob, Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face as she cradled the baby. Jacob Thomas Dawson. Jake leaned down to kiss her forehead, his own eyes suspiciously damp. He's perfect, he said, voice choked with emotion. You're perfect, Mrs. Gunderson bustled about, cleaning up and preparing warm water to wash the baby, but Jake and Lily hardly noticed, lost in the wonder of their new son. When Jake finally held the boy, his large hands cradling the tiny form with incredible gentleness, Lily saw in his face everything she'd ever hoped for in a father for her child: pride, protectiveness, and above all, unconditional love. "Hello, little Jacob," Jake murmured. "I'm your pa." The simple declaration, spoken with such certainty, brought fresh tears to Lily's eyes. In that moment, any lingering doubts about their unusual beginning vanished completely. This was her family now, Jake and Jacob, and it was more precious than anything she could have imagined on that terrible day at the church. The news of Jacob's birth spread quickly through the community. Lily's parents arrived the next day, bearing gifts and barely concealed surprise at the obvious devotion between their daughter and son-in-law. "He's a fine boy," Lily's father said gruffly, awkwardly holding his grandson. "Gets that from his mother," Jake replied, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. Mrs. Thompson watched the exchange with knowing eyes. Later, as she helped Lily settle the baby for a nap, she said quietly, "You love him, don't you? Jake, I mean." Lily looked up, startled by her mother's directness. "Yes," she admitted, "I do, and he loves you. Anyone with eyes can see it." Mrs. Thompson smoothed the blanket over baby Jacob. "I worried, when you married so suddenly, thought you were just escaping scandal." "It started that way," Lily acknowledged. "But it became so much more," her mother nodded, satisfied. "Sometimes the arrangements that begin in practicality end up being the strongest. Your father and I were a match made by our parents, did you know that?" Lily shook her head, surprised. "Oh, yes. Quite practical. He had land, I could cook and keep house. Love came later." She smiled at the memory. "Sometimes it's better that way, built on something solid instead of just feelings." As Mrs. Thompson left to prepare supper, Lily pondered her words. Perhaps her mother was right. What she and Jake had built together was founded on mutual respect and shared purpose before romantic love entered the equation. That foundation had given their feelings room to grow naturally, without the desperate intensity that had characterized her relationship with Edward. The weeks following Jacob's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries as they adjusted to life with an infant. Jake proved to be a natural father, never hesitating to walk the floor with a fussing Jacob or change a diaper when needed. He rearranged his work schedule to be more present, doing what ranch chores he could while Jacob napped one night. After they'd finally gotten a colicky Jacob to sleep, Jake and Lily collapsed into bed, exhausted but content. "You're amazing with him," Lily said, curling against Jake's side. "He makes it easy," Jake replied. "Best thing I've ever done, becoming his pa." Lily propped herself up on one elbow to look at her husband. "You never have regrets about how this all started?" Jake met her gaze steadily. "Not for a single minute." "Even when he's screaming at 3 in the morning, even then?" Jake smiled, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because he's ours, Lily, and you're mine. That's worth any amount of lost sleep." The tenderness in his touch ignited a familiar warmth within her. The doctor had given his approval for them to resume marital relations the week before, but this was the first night they'd had both energy and opportunity. Lily leaned down, pressing her lips to Jake's in a kiss that conveyed her intentions clearly. Jake responded immediately, his arms coming around her, but then hesitated. "You're sure?" he asked. "It's not too soon." "I'm sure," Lily whispered against his lips. "I want to be your wife in every way, Jake Dawson." That night, they truly became husband and wife, their bodies joining as their hearts already had. It was a beginning of sorts, the final piece falling into place in their unconventional journey from strangers to spouses to lovers. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Lily traced the line of Jake's jaw with her finger. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I think I have for some time." Jake caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. I've loved you since the moment you were brave enough to say yes to a stranger at that altar, he confessed. Just took me a while to recognize it for what it was. As summer turned to fall, life on the Dawson homestead settled into a happy routine. Jacob thrived, growing round-cheeked and strong. His dark hair and blue eyes were carbon copies of Jake's, a coincidence that amused them both but also seemed fitting somehow. In September, they attended the Pendleton Harvest Festival, Jacob's first public outing in town. Lily had been nervous about facing the community, many of whom would remember the scandal of her aborted wedding to Edward. But with Jake at her side, sturdy Jacob in his arms, she found the courage to hold her head high. The reactions were mixed. Some people whispered behind their hands, others offered congratulations that seemed sincere. Mrs. Wilson, the town's most notorious gossip, made a point of examining Jacob closely before announcing loudly, "Spitting image of his father, that one." Jake and Lily exchanged amused glances, knowing Mrs. Wilson was unaware of how accurate her observation appeared. As they browsed the stalls selling harvest goods, they encountered Edward and his new fiancée, a banker's daughter from Portland. The moment was brief but tense, Edward's gaze lingering on Jacob before he hurriedly led his companion away. "You all right?" Jake asked quietly, his free arm slipping around Lily's waist. She looked up at him, then at Jacob, who was contentedly chewing on his fist in Jake's secure hold. "More than all right," she assured him. "I have everything I need right here." The certainty in her voice seemed to please him. He bent to kiss her briefly, unconcerned with the public display. "Let's go home," he suggested. Think Jacob's had enough excitement for one day, home. The word filled Lily with warmth. Not her parents' house in town, not the life she'd once imagined with Edward, but the cozy homestead she shared with Jake and their son. It was more than just a place, it was the life they'd built together, the family they'd become. As they drove the wagon back to the ranch that evening, Jacob sleeping peacefully between them, Lily reflected on the strange path that had led her here. If Edward hadn't rejected her that day at the church, she would never have known this particular happiness. What had seemed like the worst moment of her life had, in fact, been the beginning of something far better than she could have imagined. "Penny for your thoughts," Jake said, noticing her contemplative expression. Lily smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I was just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns." Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Like a cowboy stepping up at church when a bride needs someone to stand by her." "Exactly like that," Lily agreed, her heart full. "Best unexpected turn my life ever took." Jake's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Mine too, Lily, mine too." As the wagon rolled toward home under a canopy of stars, Lily Dawson thought about second chances and brave beginnings. She thought about the man beside her who had offered his name and his heart when she needed them most. And she thought about their son, sleeping peacefully between them, unaware of the unusual circumstances of his family's formation. Some would call it chance or fate, or merely the consequence of one man's cruelty and another's kindness. But Lily knew it for what it was, a love story that had begun in the most unlikely of ways, but had grown into something true and lasting. A story still being written day by day in a small homestead on the rolling plains of Oregon, where a cowboy, a rejected bride, and their beloved son had found their happily ever after. Winter in eastern Oregon arrived early that year, the first snow falling before Thanksgiving. Jacob, now 4 months old, watched the white flakes from the window with wide-eyed fascination as Lily held him bundled in a quilt. "First snow, little man," Jake said, coming in from securing the livestock. He stomped snow from his boots and hung his heavy coat by the door. "Won't be the last." "Feels like we're in for a hard winter." Lily held Jacob up for a kiss from his father. "Mrs. Gunderson says the same. The squirrels have been gathering extra nuts and the beaver dams on the creek are higher than usual." Jake nodded, taking Jacob into his arms. The baby immediately grabbed for his father's beard, a favorite game. "Might be we should lay in more supplies than planned. Don't want to risk being snowed in without necessities." The next day, Jake hitched the wagon and they made the trip into Pendleton together. The town was bustling with others who had the same idea, stocking up before winter truly set in. As Jake loaded sacks of flour and sugar into the wagon, Lily took Jacob to the mercantile to purchase additional supplies. Mrs. Dawson, the shopkeeper, greeted her warmly. And young Master Jacob. My, how he's grown. Lily smiled, proud as always to hear her son complimented. He has, nearly outgrown his clothes already. As she selected fabric to make new garments for Jacob, the bell above the door jingled. Lily looked up to see Mrs. Franklin Edwards' mother entering the store. Their eyes met, and for a moment Lily thought the older woman might ignore her. Instead, after a visible hesitation, Mrs. Franklin approached. Lily, she said, her voice stiff but not unkind, and this must be the baby. Jacob, Lily supplied, adjusting the blanket so the older woman could see the infant's face. Jacob Thomas Dawson. Mrs. Franklin studied the child, her expression unreadable. He's a handsome boy, she admitted finally. Thank you, Lily replied, unsure what else to say. Edward is married now, Mrs. Franklin said abruptly. To Miss Catherine Wells from Portland, Lily nodded. Yes, I know, we saw them at the Harvest Festival. She hesitated, then added sincerely, I wish them happiness. Something in Mrs. Franklin's face softened slightly. You seem. Well, Lily, content. I am, Lily confirmed, very much so. Mrs. Franklin's gaze shifted past Lily to the window where Jake could be seen loading supplies into the wagon, his movements efficient despite the cold. Your husband, he's good to you and the child, the best, Lily said simply. The older woman nodded once, seemingly satisfied. Good, that's good, she glanced at Jacob once more, a flash of what might have been regret crossing her features before turning away. Good day, Mrs. Dawson, as Mrs. Franklin moved to the other side of the store. Jake entered, stamping snow from his boots. Almost finished loading, he announced, then noticed Lily's expression. Everything all right, Lily nodded, grateful for his steady presence. Yes, just ran into Mrs. Franklin. Jake's eyes immediately scanned the store, locating Edward's mother by the fabric counter. She say something to upset you? No, Lily assured him, touched by his protectiveness. Actually, she was, almost friendly, in her way. Jake looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. Got everything you need here, almost. Just need some more yarn for Jacob's winter blanket. As they completed their purchases and prepared to leave, Lily noticed Mrs. Franklin watching them. The older woman gave a small, formal nod, which Lily returned before Jake escorted her and Jacob out into the snowy afternoon. The trip home was cold but peaceful, Jacob sleeping soundly in Lily's arms as the wagon made its way through the increasingly heavy snowfall. By the time they reached the homestead, the landscape had been transformed into a white wonderland, the familiar contours of their land softened beneath a blanket of snow. That evening, with Jacob asleep in his cradle and a fire crackling in the hearth, Lily and Jake sat close together on the small sofa Jake had built the previous month. What did Mrs. Franklin really want? Jake asked quietly, his arm around Lily's shoulders. Lily leaned into his warmth. I think she wanted to see Jacob, to see if... She trailed off, not needing to complete the thought. If he looked like Edward, Jake finished for her. Yes, Lily sighed. He doesn't, of course. He looks like you, which is the strangest coincidence. Jake was quiet for a moment, his fingers gently tracing patterns on Lily's shoulder. Does it bother you, seeing the Franklins around town? Lily considered the question honestly. Not anymore, she decided. At first it hurt, but now I'm grateful things happened as they did. She turned to look at Jake, the firelight casting his features in warm gold. If Edward hadn't left me at that altar, I wouldn't have this life. Jake's eyes softened, and I wouldn't have either of you. He bent to kiss her, a kiss that held all the tenderness and passion that had grown between them over the months of their marriage. When they parted, Lily rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I've been thinking, Jake said after a while, his voice rumbling beneath her ear, about Christmas is coming, our first Christmas as a family. His hand reached to stroke her hair. Thought we might invite your folks to stay with us, and Mrs. Gunderson, of course, make it special for Jacob. Lily smiled at the thought. He's too young to remember it. True, Jake acknowledged, but we'll remember, and there'll be photographs to show him someday. The idea of building family traditions together filled Lily with warmth. I'd like that, she said, very much. As winter deepened, the Dawson homestead became a cozy haven against the cold. Jake added extra insulation to the cabin walls and kept the firewood stacked high. Lily crafted new quilts and transformed the main room with evergreen boughs and red ribbons as Christmas approached. Her parents arrived 3 days before Christmas, bringing gifts and news from town. Mrs. Gunderson joined them on Christmas Eve, her contribution to the festivities, a large plum pudding and stories of Christmases past. "This reminds me of when I was a girl," she told them as they sat around the table after dinner. Jacob passed from lap to lap, basking in the attention. Family gathered close, everyone safe from the winter outside. "Best kind of Christmas there is," Jake agreed, his eyes meeting Lily's across the table. That night, after everyone had retired to bed, her parents in the second bedroom, Mrs. Gunderson on a cot near the fire and Jacob in his cradle beside their bed, Jake presented Lily with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Wanted to give you this privately," he explained. Inside was a delicate gold locket, simple but elegant. When Lily opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Jake on one side and Jacob on the other, their identical blue eyes staring back at her. "Jake," she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "It's beautiful." "Had it made in Pendleton," he said, looking pleased at her reaction. "Thought you should have both your men close to your heart." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I love it, and I love you." Jake held her close, his voice husky with emotion. "Best Christmas of my life," he murmured against her hair, "having you and Jacob a real family." "The first of many," Lily promised. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright, the sun transforming the snow-covered landscape into a glittering wonderland. After gifts were exchanged and a festive breakfast consumed, Jake surprised everyone by producing a camera he'd borrowed from the photographer in Pendleton. "Thought we should have a family portrait," he explained. "Something to remember this day by." They arranged themselves on the porch, Lily holding Jacob in his new Christmas outfit, Jake standing proud beside her, her parents and Mrs. Gunderson flanking them. The photograph would later occupy a place of honor on the mantle, tangible proof of the family they had become. As winter gradually gave way to spring, Jacob grew more active, learning to roll over and sit up, his personality emerging more each day. He had Jake's quiet determination and Lily's quick smile, a combination that charmed everyone he met. In April, just after Jacob's 9-month birthday, Lily began to suspect she might be pregnant again. The familiar signs were there: the slight nausea in the mornings, the tender breasts, the unusual fatigue. She waited until she was certain before sharing the news with Jake. One evening, after they'd put Jacob to bed, she joined Jake on the porch, where he was enjoying the mild spring air after a long day of work. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand in hers. Jake looked at her expectantly. "Everything all right?" "Very all right," Lily assured him, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have another baby, around November, I think." Jake's expression transformed from surprise to joy in an instant. "Really, you're sure?" Lily nodded, smiling at his reaction. "Pretty sure." "All the signs are there." Jake pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "Another baby," he said wonderingly. "Jacob will have a brother or sister." "Are you happy about it?" Lily asked, though his reaction had already answered her question. "Happier than I can say," Jake confirmed, his hands gentle on her waist. "Our family growing bigger. It's everything I ever wanted without knowing I wanted it." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer months. Unlike with Jacob, when she'd been consumed with worry and uncertainty, Lily found herself enjoying the experience this time. She had Jake's unwavering support, a healthy firstborn who delighted them daily, and a home filled with love. Jacob took his first steps in August, toddling unsteadily from the sofa to Jake's outstretched arms, his face alight with accomplishment. By September, he was getting into everything, keeping both parents constantly on their toes. "He's going to be a handful when the new baby comes," Lily observed one evening as she watched Jake patiently redirect Jacob from the fireplace tools for the third time in an hour. "Good thing there's two of us," Jake replied, scooping up their son and tickling him until he squealed with laughter. The sound of their combined laughter, Jake's deep chuckle and Jacob's high-pitched giggles, was, to Lily, the very definition of happiness. She rested her hands on her growing belly, wondering if this new child would have Jake's laugh too. In late October, with the baby's arrival just weeks away, Jake hired additional help for the ranch, a young man named Sam Porter, who had recently arrived in Pendleton looking for work. With Sam handling the daily chores, Jake was able to stay closer to home as Lily's time drew near. "Don't have to hover, you know," Lily told him with fond exasperation when she caught him watching her fold laundry one afternoon. "I'm not going to break. Just like being near you," Jake replied unabashedly. "Both of you." Lily's labor began on a crisp November morning, just as dawn was breaking over the eastern hills. Unlike Jacob's birth, which had been long and difficult, this baby came quickly and with relative ease. By midday, Lily was holding their daughter in her arms, a perfect, tiny girl with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that promised to be as blue as her father's and brother's. "Margaret Rose Dawson," Jake said softly, sitting beside them on the bed, his arm around Lily's shoulders. "She's beautiful." "Like her mama," Mrs. Gunderson declared as she bustled about the room, cleaning up. "Going to be a heartbreaker, that one." Jake gently stroked the baby's cheek with one finger, thinking I might need to get a shotgun ready for when the boys come calling. Lily laughed, leaning against him tiredly but happily. "She's not even an hour old, Jake. Never too early to be prepared," he replied with mock seriousness. When Jacob was brought in to meet his sister, he approached the bed cautiously, his small face serious as he examined the bundle in his mother's arms. "Baby," Lily explained, shifting so he could see Margaret's face. "Your sister." Jacob looked from the baby to his father, clearly seeking confirmation of this strange new development. "That's right, son," Jake said, lifting Jacob onto the bed beside them. "You're a big brother now, got an important job helping look after little Maggie." Jacob seemed to consider this, then reached out one finger to touch the baby's hand. When Margaret reflexively grabbed his finger, Jacob's face broke into a delighted smile. "See, she likes you already," Lily told him. As she watched her husband and son bonding with her newborn daughter, Lily felt a profound sense of completion. 2 years ago, she could never have imagined this life married to Jake, mother to 2 children, mistress of her own home. What had begun in humiliation and desperation had transformed into something beautiful beyond measure. The next few months were a blur of adjustments as they adapted to life with 2 children. Margaret proved to be an easier baby than Jacob had been, settling quickly into a predictable routine of feeding and sleeping. Jacob, now an energetic toddler, required constant supervision, but also showed an unexpected gentleness with his sister, bringing his toys to show her and patting her head carefully when she cried. By the spring of 1880, life on the Dawson homestead had found a new rhythm. The ranch prospered under Jake's careful management, allowing them to hire permanent help and expand their operations. Lily divided her time between caring for the children and maintaining their home, finding unexpected joy in the domestic routines that structured their days. One warm May afternoon, as Lily sat on a blanket in the yard watching Jacob play while Margaret napped beside her, she spotted riders approaching. As they drew closer, she recognized Edward Franklin and his father, accompanied by a third man she didn't know. Lily's first instinct was to gather the children and go inside, but she resisted the impulse. This was her home, her land. She wouldn't be made to feel uncomfortable on it. Jake, who had been mending a fence nearby, saw the visitors at the same moment. He immediately put down his tools and crossed to stand protectively near Lily and the children. "Franklin," he said as the men dismounted, "twice in 2 years is becoming a habit." Edward looked uncomfortable, but Mr. Franklin stepped forward with uncharacteristic humility. "We've come to talk business, Dawson, if you're willing." Jake's expression remained guarded. "What kind of business?" The third man, a well-dressed gentleman with a city look about him, stepped forward and introduced himself. Thomas Reed, sir. I represent the Eastern Oregon Land Company. We're interested in purchasing parcels in this area for a new railway spur line. Jake's eyebrows rose. A railway through here? Yes, Mr. Reed confirmed. The proposed route would cross the corner of your property. We're prepared to offer very generous compensation. And the Franklins? Jake asked, his tone making it clear he suspected there was more to the story. Mr. Franklin cleared his throat. The main depot would be built on our land. It would bring considerable business to Pendleton. I see. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. And you need my land to make it happen. Just a small portion, Mr. Reed assured him. Less than 10 acres along your eastern boundary. Jake glanced at Lily, silently seeking her opinion. She gave a small nod, indicating her trust in his judgment. I'll need to think about it, Jake told the men. Look over the proposal carefully. Of course, Mr. Reed agreed, producing a folded document from his coat pocket. All the details are here, including the offer. As Jake accepted the papers, Edward's gaze strayed to Jacob, who had wandered closer to investigate the visitors. The resemblance between the toddler and Jake was striking: the same blue eyes, the same set of the jaw, the same serious expression. Your boy looks like you, Edward said, his voice strange. Yes, Jake agreed simply. He does. Something passed between the two men, an understanding, perhaps, or a final acknowledgement of how things had turned out. Whatever it was, it seemed to settle something for Edward, who nodded once before turning back to his horse. As the men prepared to leave, Mr. Franklin lingered. For what it's worth, Dawson, he said quietly, I misjudged you, and Lily, I'm not often wrong, but in this case I was. It was as close to an apology as the proud man was likely to give. Jake accepted it with a nod. No harm done in the end, things worked out as they should. After the visitors had ridden away, Lily picked up Margaret, who had awakened during the conversation. What do you think? She asked, nodding toward the proposal in Jake's hand. Jake sat beside her on the blanket, Jacob immediately climbing into his lap. The money would be useful, he acknowledged. Could expand the herd, maybe build that bigger house we've been talking about. But, Lily prompted, sensing his hesitation, but I don't much like doing business with the Franklins, Jake admitted, even if it's just a railroad deal. Lily considered this. The past is the past, Jake. Maybe this is a chance to put it all behind us for good. Jake looked at her thoughtfully. You're a remarkable woman, Lily Dawson. Not many would be so forgiving. I have nothing to forgive anymore, Lily said honestly. If Edward hadn't rejected me that day, I wouldn't have you or Jacob or Margaret. I wouldn't have this life. She smiled, lifting Margaret higher in her arms. Besides, look what I got instead. How could I possibly hold a grudge? Jake's expression softened as he looked at their children, Jacob contentedly playing with a stick in his lap, Margaret blinking sleepily in Lily's arms. You make a compelling argument, he conceded. In the end, they accepted the railroad's offer, using the money to build a larger house on their property and invest in expanding their cattle operation. The railway brought increased prosperity to the region, and the Dawson Ranch thrived along with it. As the years passed, their family grew. A second son, Samuel, joined them in 1882, followed by another daughter, Rebecca, in 1885. Each child brought new joy to their lives, expanding the circle of love that had begun with an impulsive offer at an altar all those years ago. Jacob, as he grew, showed every sign of being Jake's son in spirit as well as appearance. He had the same affinity for horses, the same quiet determination, the same strong sense of right and wrong. By the time he was 10, he was Jake's shadow on the ranch, absorbing every lesson his father could teach him. One evening, as Lily and Jake sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the yard, Lily found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point. What are you thinking about so seriously? Jake asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Just. How blessed we are, Lily replied, leaning against his shoulder. How far we've come since that day in the church. Jake put his arm around her, drawing her closer. Seems like another lifetime now. It does, Lily agreed. Sometimes I wonder if that girl standing alone at the altar was even me. She was, Jake said confidently. She was strong enough to take a chance on a stranger when her world was falling apart, brave enough to build something new from the ashes of what she'd lost. He pressed a kiss to her temple. That's still you, Lily. Still the woman I fall in love with more every day. Lily smiled, turning to kiss him properly. Even after all these years, his words still had the power to make her heart flutter. Mama, Papa, look what I found. 6-year-old Samuel called, running toward them with something cupped carefully in his hands. The moment broke as they turned their attention to their son and whatever treasure he'd discovered. But as the evening progressed into the familiar routine of supper, baths, and bedtime stories, Lily carried the warmth of Jake's words in her heart. Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Lily and Jake lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, her head on his chest, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Do you ever regret it?" Lily asked suddenly. "Marrying me that day?" Jake's hand stilled. "What brought this on?" Lily shrugged against him. "Just thinking about how young we were, how little we knew each other, how you took on responsibility for another man's child without hesitation." Jake shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look at her in the dim light filtering through the window. "Lily Dawson, marrying you was the single best decision I ever made. Jacob may not have been mine by blood, but he became mine in every way that matters. And everything good in my life, our children, our home, this life we've built, it all began the moment you said yes to me in that church." The certainty in his voice banished the last whisper of doubt. Lily reached up to touch his face, tracing the familiar lines that years of sun and laughter had etched there. "I love you, Jake Dawson," she said simply, "more than I ever thought possible." Jake turned his head to press a kiss into her palm, "And I love you, always will." As they settled back into each other's arms, Lily thought about the strange, twisting path of fate that had led her here. Edward's rejection, once the most painful moment of her life, now seemed like a necessary step in finding her way to where she truly belonged in this home, in this life, in these arms. The pregnant bride rejected at the altar had found not just a husband that day, but a partner, a best friend, a father for her children, and a love that had only deepened with each passing year. What had begun as an act of kindness from a stranger had blossomed into the kind of love story that lasted a lifetime, unexpected in its beginning, but perfect in its unfolding. Outside their window, under a canopy of stars, the land that had witnessed their story stretched in all directions, the Dawson homestead, now a prosperous ranch, testament to what could be built from humble beginnings when two people faced life's challenges together. And inside, in the warmth of each other's embrace, Jake and Lily Dawson drifted to sleep, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the most unlikely of ways.